Michael Tiffany from White Ops. Michael, let me ask you, as we observe a growing sophistication of targeting opportunities, can I really trust targeting?
No, you can't. Why? Because of the proliferation of fake data and actually fake audiences, because there's so much money in increasing the apparent number of people who are interacting with online content and watching things, that there's basically a market for fake people watching TV, listening to streaming music, and of course, clicking on ads. Now, with that provocative answer, I would like to walk you through a couple recent examples. I have the good fortune of being able to share these insights with you because I started a company, a hacker company. I'm a hacker myself, a very polite hacker. And we've had the good fortune to grow to see a lot of the digital advertising ecosystem in our fight against the profitability of botnets. And as a result of that, that growth in our protection, we're able to see a tremendous amount of digital advertising at this point, thanks to the companies that you see here. We've been able to increase our visibility and our fraud protection across really the majority of programmatic advertising. And as connected TV is going increasingly programmatic, that means that we've been able to uncover some really extraordinary fraud operations, such as a very sophisticated operation I'd like to dig into with you all that we termed Ice Bucket. We had predicted that given the levels of fraud that we saw several years ago in digital advertising, in online video, we thought that it was at least conceivable that our cybercriminal adversaries would come up with ways of gaming connected TV, but that remained a theoretical threat for some time. What the Ice Bucket operation shows is that digital TV fraud can not only work, but it can scale. It can scale to the tune of billions of fraudulent ad spots, affecting a significantly large percentage of all apparent CTV ad spots that can be bought at a given time. The trick to pulling this off was something called Ssai spoofing. What the Ice Bucket operators were doing, they were not compromising digital TVs. It's not like they had a virus on a bunch of Samsung smart TVs. Instead, they were using compromised devices across a variety of vectors. They had some mobiles, some tablets and phones in the botnet. They had compromised some of what we would term connected TV devices, as well as just a large number of computers. And they were doing something that we call Ssai spoofing, which is a technique whereby they were taking these compromised devices. The reason why they were compromising so many devices and wrapping them into this operation is so that they had IP address diversity. So it looked like a bunch of internet connections all across the world, which looked right. You know, it looked feasible. It didn't look clearly artificial. Then, through the magic of Ssai spoofing, they were able to make all of those devices look as if they were actually smart TVs that were actually watching television, and therefore were triggering bid requests in the programmatic ecosystem for digitally connected advertising. They were kind of in testing mode during the winter. And then once they validated that their approach could work, they really stepped on the gas and started dramatically increasing the number of fraudulent impressions that were available to bid on, showing that this is a crime that can actually scale. This is the first time we saw anything like this working at this level of scale and therefore economics. So it's of course important to ask, how does something like this happen? And the short answer is we are looking at an evolutionary landscape of very smart attackers, people who are trying fraud in a variety of ways. And the ones that are easy to catch get caught. And when they get caught, they get scrubbed out of the ecosystem. That can feel, like winning, of course. But what happens is the smart adversaries evolve. So over time, as the industry purges the easy to find cybercriminal operations, the survivors get ever more sophisticated. And when you fast forward to today, ending 2020, we've essentially selected for tier 1 adversaries, the really good operators who are naturally seeking the best ways to make money. So it turns out that there were not necessarily big technical barriers to doing fraud in connected TV. It's that the connected TV landscape was small and therefore hadn't presented a big profit potential to the kind of criminals that are smart enough to do Ssai spoofing. But now that CTV spending has actually been the fastest area of growth in digital advertising, that's essentially attracted the heavies. To what degree have they been attracted? To the degree that we are observing a 1,300% increase in not just CTV traffic, but also attempts to exploit it, which now leads us to where we are today. I think the most important takeaway that I can share with this audience is that we're not the only creatives in this industry. The bad guys get creative too. And by the way, they're perfectly capable of harnessing and utilizing big data and using it to advance their fraudulent aims. Big data is not just used by the good guys. And to illustrate that, I want to share one more discovery that we recently made. It's a connected TV adjacent scam that used that exploited the mobile app ecosystem. And the reason why I want to put this on your radar is, while this was a kind of mobile focused fraud operation, it's the kind of thing that is certainly going to appear in the advanced TV landscape as it becomes more normal to install apps on TVs. I give you Terracotta. Terracotta was a very sophisticated fraud operation that used mobile devices that were not exactly infected in the way that cybercriminal defenders like us were fighting years ago. See, the kind of botnets that we take on, in fact, a lot of cybercrime is based on infecting real people's computers with viruses. So the real people have no idea that they've been infected. They simply opened up an infectious file or visited the wrong website that served a web exploit kit. Terracotta was different. It used social engineering, which they were able to scale. the terracotta operation was based on a large number of apps that were offered for download in the App Store, purporting to offer users free shoes. The free shoe lure was their most popular lure. And the way it worked is people stumbled on this app in the App Store. And according to the app, if you filled out your information, then you would be entered into a contest to get a free pair of shoes. Okay. So people installed this app. They went through the sign-up process. And because of the rules of the game, as the fraudulent app explained it, they expected free shoes to arrive in a week, in a month, certain period in the future. And these app developers were very clever. After they got their victims to install the apps, the app simply lay in wait for quite some time until a user would have forgotten about it. And then after a few days, in some cases a week, the fraudulent part of the operation kicked in. And this was ultimately an ad fraud operation, where everyone who installed this app on a tablet or phone started viewing apps in the background with no knowledge. And another reason why I wanted to share this particular operation and kind of dwell on its specifics is that it really impressed us in its sophistication, including its anti-detection sophistication. So fundamentally, the way that this fraud operation was monetizing was by offering fake mobile inventory. Well, mobile inventory is supposed to be protected by something called appads.txt, which would close the door against this kind of mobile ad spoofing. To get around this, the fraud operators specifically spoofed mobile apps that weren't yet adopters of appads.txt. So the criminal developers knew exactly what they were doing. They knew exactly how the defenses in the advertising ecosystem worked, and they specially crafted their operation to not defeat those defenses, but cleverly evade them. Now, while this operation was incredibly savvy, and I want to acknowledge the sophistication of our adversaries there, it was not unstoppable. We were able to get our arms around the entire operation. Every single one of the fraudulent apps, they all appeared independent of each other, but had subtle links between them. And then we were able to collaborate with Google to not just shut down this operation on the ad monetization part of the ecosystem in programmatic, but we also found everyone who had fallen for this and had installed the apps. And we got all the apps pulled off the App Store. And Google has a new mechanism whereby they could send a notification to everyone who had installed the app saying, hey, you actually should uninstall this, which dropped this operation down to almost nothing. Now, having shared this bad news with you all, I'd like to leave you with at least a glimmer of hope. To understand how to protect yourself against fraud, you have to understand the impacts of fraud. One obvious one is when you buy an ad that's not shown to a real human being, you've just been robbed of a portion of your ad budget. But the impacts can be broader than that. When you're buying across multiple channels, and some of it is fraudulent and some of it is clean, you may walk away with a completely false idea of what's working and what isn't. That's going to drive bad business decisions going forward, where you're doubling down perhaps on the wrong channels. These kinds of operations also can essentially poison what you know about your own audience. So when these operations succeed, they also essentially infect your customer data platforms or your audience platforms with real people, but also fake people. And that can have long-term downstream effects. Each one of those is associated with different monetization paths to our enemy. The ultimate way that we win and we beat the bad guys is to make their crimes unprofitable. We can't get everyone arrested, but what we can do is we can make this a substantially less attractive crime. So skepticism actually really matters. Being a savvy buyer really matters. As well, I would ask you to collaborate with industry standards and the rest of the industry to encourage the widespread adoption of things like app-ads.txt and new spoofing defenses in connected TV, or this problem will get worse before it gets better. It's important, I think, to partner carefully, to question the data that seems to prove things that are hard to believe in terms of performance. Of course, you should not just advocate for, but also demand trust and transparency. And finally, I would encourage you all to be skeptical about or be aware of the limits of audience targeting. I think that in the early days of programmatic, there was a huge emphasis on a focus on audience without caring about context, without caring about content. I would say that now is the time to swing back in the other direction because the audience data can be faked. I would encourage you to spend more attention on content and context. Content really matters. And in that aspect of your advertising planning is empirical. Like you can verify the content that your advertising is supporting, and that can't be faked. So that's a place where you can sort of lay down a foundation for trust.
Thank you, Michael, for the advice. Well, at least I hope I will never have to explain to my CEO what his level of details. Otherwise, I will be in trouble.